Welcome to Therapy in the Great Outdoors, the podcast where we explore the business and practice of nature-based pediatric therapy of all kinds. If you're an outdoor-loving pediatric practitioner in the fields of occupational, physical, or speech therapy, social work, or mental health, this podcast will help you start and grow a successful nature-based practice or program. I am the ever honest, always 100% real, you'll hear it all on this podcast, Dr. Laura Park Figueroa. I'm a pediatric OT with over 20 years of experience, and I run a thriving nature-based practice with profitable locations in 2 different states and multi-six figures in revenue. I also host the free online community at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com to help you pursue your nature-based therapy dreams too. Are you ready to take action on those dreams? Let's jump in. Hello, friends. I was thinking about what to share with you all on this episode, and I'm recording impromptu here because we had a really cool thing happen in our outdoor OT group today in my practice, and I wanted to share it. And I thought it would be a good story to share with you all to explain application of a strategy and an approach that you can use in treatment with children. The COOP approach, which is the cognitive orientation to daily occupational performance. They shorten it COOP, C-O-OP. The COOP approach is something I've known about for a really long time. I actually included it as one of the elements or kind of strategies that you can use in my nature-based therapy approach, the ConTiGO approach. When I first wrote the manual for the first training I ever did for the ConTiGO approach, ConTiGO stands for Connection and Transformation in the Great Outdoors. For those of you who may be new to the podcast, welcome. This is the approach I developed in 2019, and I first led a nature-based retreat in 2019 to teach elements of the ConTiGO approach to a group of about 27 therapists. And at that retreat, I wrote a manual. I think it was about 100 pages long. It was pretty robust. And one of the approaches that I included as influencing how we do therapy outdoors with children in my practice when we use the ConTiGO approach was this COOP approach. And it is a cognitive approach to therapy. And I'm not an expert in it. I have not attended their training. I should say this very clearly before. So please, I will give you some other resources to look at to delve into this approach a little more. But the COOP approach is something I knew about for a while. And today in a treatment session, I absolutely got to implement it. So I want to share that story with you all. First, let's talk about what the COOP approach is. Now, there is a really great, I will link it in the show notes today. There is a really great episode that Sarah Lyon just did on the OT Potential podcast. So I also want to say, I always feel like I'm saying this on the podcast here. This podcast is for all professionals who work with children. This approach, the COOP approach, this is going to get confusing because mine is called the ConTiGO approach and this is the COOP approach. So I should just say COOP. COOP is not just usable in OT. You can use it in any profession that works with children. And I think it is just a really great way of interacting with kids, the system that they teach. So I'm going to share with you that system. And I do want to say, go listen if you want more information about this approach after you listen to this episode, go listen to that episode that Sarah Lyon did with Helen Politaiko. I hope I'm saying her last name. I even listened to Sarah's podcast right before this to try to say her last name. So Helen Politaiko is the creator of the COOP approach, and she is widely published and has tons of evidence behind this approach. So it is very much an evidence-based practice. And ConTiGO, my nature-based therapy approach, is all about making sure that we are doing evidence-based therapy when we are out in nature. And so that is one of the reasons that I included COOP as a strategy and a method inside of my treatment manual. I've just recommended, it's in the section on kind of evidence to support nature-based therapy. And this is one of the things that I talk about using in nature-based practice. Okay, so what is the COOP approach? And how is it different than what we would typically see maybe in the way we maybe traditionally in some therapy settings with kids have done therapy. So the implementation of the approach goes by a system of goal, plan, do, and check. Okay. So you're going to make a goal, you're going to make a plan for the goal, you're going to do the goal, do the plan, and then you're going to check. You're going to circle back and reflect. And that's a big part of my approach in ConTiGO is reflection. That's a huge part of, I think, how we learn as therapists is to reflect on our practice. So goal, plan, do, check. Now, again, I'm not an expert. I want to get to telling you the story about how I implemented this today in a treatment session. So I want to just make sure that I'm not speaking here as an expert. I'm a little nervous to even put this out there, but I just want to share with you the reality of trying something out in your practice. First of all, goal. That's the first step of co-op. The key thing in co-op is that you are going to have the child decide what the goal is. Okay. And this is different than how we even do it in my practice. We work with some kids that are too young to really articulate their own goals when they're 3 or 4. It's really hard to have a kid articulate a goal then. But in particular, this group we were working with today was 7 to 9-year-olds, and kids that are 7 to 9 years old are very capable of saying what they would like to do. Most of them are. And that is the first step, is that the child or the person that you are using this approach with, this is not always used in pediatrics, of course, but the person is the one who has the say about what the goal is. Okay. The second part is plan. So you make a plan together. And part of my understanding of co-op as well is that the therapist is there to facilitate the thinking, but not to actually give the solutions. Okay. And this is a huge part of inquiry-based learning, which is another thing in the ConTiGO approach, where in inquiry-based learning with children, you're asking questions to them or asking questions to help them think through things rather than just giving them the direct answer. So that is a big part of what we do in the ConTiGO approach as well. So working with the child to get a plan in place, have them make a plan, say what they're going to do, then they're going to do the plan. So they try it out, and that's the do. And then you check, and that's the reflection part. So what happened today, 7 minutes of telling you the background. What happened today was that we were doing a fort building activity with some children. So there were 4 kids, and one of the kids was really adamant about wanting to get a branch down from a tree. He wanted a really long branch, and he didn't like any of the other branches that were on the ground. And so he took a rope that we had nearby. First, he had this really thin rope, and we asked if he would like some thicker rope. That we showed him some other varieties. He picked a thicker one, and he had this great idea that he was going to throw the rope over the tree branch, a pretty significantly long tree branch. I'd say the branch was probably 10 feet long. And then we would be able to pull the branch down from the tree, pull the branch off the tree by yanking on the rope underneath. And so for probably a good 30 minutes, I would say, 20 or 30 minutes, he was attempting to throw this rope over the branch. The way he was attempting to throw it was by having the pile of rope at his feet and taking the very end of the rope and trying to chuck it over the branch, which was, 8 to 10 feet above his head. And as you might imagine, this was not very successful. So very rarely did he get the rope to even touch the branch that he was looking for. And he tried various branches. He tried kind of different locations. He tried doing it over smaller branches to see if that would work, but he just couldn't really effectively get the rope over the branch. And our volunteers and myself and the other therapists that were there, we were all really good about not cueing him, just letting him keep trying, we were kind of nearby, and maybe occasionally we'd make a comment like, nice throw, but really we were standing nearby and supporting in a positive way, but we weren't commenting a lot. which is exactly what we want. He was very in his element, very happy, very excited to be doing it, and just trial and error over and over. And eventually I sat there thinking about co-op, and I was like, how could I get him? Because I'm in my brain, of course, thinking, just tie a rock to the end of it, buddy, and throw it over that branch. Because I've hung so many tree swings that way. That's just naturally where my brain goes when I think about trying to get a rope over a branch, is tie something heavy on the end of it and throw it over the branch. So I think I said to him, I'm going to say Buddy. His name is not Buddy, but I don't want to say his name on the podcast. I said, Buddy, I wonder, how is that working out for you? Actually what I said first was, Buddy, what's the goal here? I wonder what the goal is. And he said, I want to get that branch down, or something like that. And I said, how is that working out for you? How is your plan working out for you? And he was like, not very well. And I was like, okay, yeah, I noticed that. I noticed it seems like it's having a hard time getting up over that branch. I wonder if there's something you could do differently. Is there anything you could do differently? And that was enough to have him say, maybe I could tie a stick on the end of it. And I was like, why don't we try that? And so he tied a stick on the end of it. It was a really small stick, like a 6-inch, 5-inch stick maybe. Tied a stick on the end. It got closer, but he couldn't get it all the way over the branch. And then he said, I need a bigger stick. I need to tie it. I need more weight. I need a bigger stick to put on it. And I just looked at one of our volunteers and was like, yes, because that is what we want to see. That's what we want to see, is children problem solving for themselves. It would have been very easy for me or one of the other adults there to say to him, you know what? I've hung a lot of tree swings, and I always use a rock on the end. Do you want to tie a rock on the end and throw it over the branch? And of course he would have been like, yes, but he wouldn't have had the internal sense of pride of coming up with that solution on his own. Okay. And this is part of the ConTiGO approach, but also part of the co-op method and approach too, is letting children have that moment, letting children have the moment where they have come to the solution on their own. And sometimes it takes a really long time. Myself and the other adults who were there I felt like I was like sitting on my hands and biting my tongue to not say anything to him, because he was happy and persistent and trial over and over. He needed that. And meanwhile, as an OT, I'm also thinking he's getting a lot of good proprioceptive input and bilateral movement, like just chucking that rope up multiple times, like aiming, and the motor control he needed to try to adjust. It was a very rich opportunity for him because he was so motivated to do it. So when he finally got the stick, a big enough stick over it, he probably threw 5 more times with the larger stick on it, and he just launched it perfectly over that branch. And this was I should have mentioned this was a very dead tree. So the property that we use for our Wednesday groups here in Madison, Wisconsin, where I live, my practice is still in California. I run both locations, but I live in Wisconsin now. So the property that we use has some trees that were damaged in a fire years ago. And so this was a tree that was very dead. And so he knew the branch would likely come down. We've broken branches off of these trees before. He launched that stick perfectly over the branch. And another peer came over and helped him get the other side down. They used a stick. It didn't go all the way over and back down the side, so it was high up in the air. They problem solved to get a longer stick, to try to knock the other stick down further so that they could reach it, and then pull the rope all the way down over. And then he tugged, and that branch just came down to the ground, perfectly landed. I didn't get it on video, but we were all like amazed and excited for him. And he was so ecstatic. And so it's just a really cool application of co-op, of really helping a child think through the goal. What's the goal? Making a plan, doing the goal, and then checking, obviously he got it down, right? But I probably could have done, any of us there probably could have done a little bit more processing with him even afterwards of what worked and what didn't. So one of the things we do in the ConTiGO approach, in my nature-based approach, is we we use these three reflection questions. What went well? What went wrong? What will I do differently next time? And so those are questions that we use to debrief after our sessions often. And then we also use those questions with children and just say, hey, how could we change what we do later to have a better outcome if we didn't like the outcome? Or maybe we did like it and we want to do the same thing again. But that reflection piece is so important. So I probably could have done a little bit better job going back to him and actually even checking in about what was successful. But he was just so happy. And it was a really cool story about a real life application of co-op in practice in a nature-based therapy session. So I thought I'd share that with you all. I will put the link to some information about the co-op approach on their website, as well as a link to the OT Potential episode in which Sarah Lyon interviews Helen Politaiko. And it is just such a good episode. I would highly recommend that you all listen to it. I believe there's CEUs available too if you go over there to listen to that episode and probably pay. I don't know how Sarah has set it up, but CEUs may be available for that. Yeah, that's it. That's a short episode for y'all today, but I just wanted to share that story because I just thought it was so cool. And it's a really easy thing to apply in practice, although easy to remember, but also really got to bite your tongue and just not give kids the answers. That's it for today. And I will see you all or talk to you all next week. Bye. Thanks for joining me today for Therapy in the Great Outdoors. If you want valuable advice as you start or grow your nature-based pediatric practice, get my free ebook, The Nature-Based Practice Roadmap. It is a guide to help you focus and avoid costly mistakes as you start or grow your outdoor work with children. In it, I share the 4 stages of nature-based practice, what you need to focus on and common mistakes to avoid in each stage, plus a checklist of specific action steps for you to take at each stage in the process. Get it at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com/roadmap. So until next time, get outside, connect, reflect, and enjoy therapy in the great outdoors.